Hello there, all you truckers and wannabe truckers. Great day today. Welcome to our educational series titled Unpacking Telematics. All the bells of whistles of telematics we're going to unpack. That's what we're doing. It's brought to you by Netstar, a subsidiary of the Altron Group, and that is in partnership with FleetWatch Truck Magazine. My name is Patrick O'Leary. I'm managing editor of FleetWatch, and I'll be hosting the series, which we've split into 11 different episodes, each one focusing on a different chunk, a bite chunk of telematics. What is the telematics? When you break it down. We have been talking to various experts from Netstar on aspects such as how telematics can improve your driver behavior. How do you use it to improve driver behavior? How do you use it to better plan your routes? What's the best system for a small business? A whole lot of these episodes will cover the wide spectrum of telematics. We hope it's going to be of great value to all of you. It's an educational series. And telematics, used to be a nice to have. No longer, it's a must have. It helps you to improve your efficiency, your productivity, and of course your safety, both of your fleet, your drivers, and other road users. Now, kicking off in the studio, I have with me today a great man, Cliff DeVette, who Netstar's Chief Technology Officer. And Cliff has years of experience in the technology arena. He really is a techno buff. And he's seen telematics grow over the year. And he's going to explain to us what is telematics and a few other things. Welcome, Cliff.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure, man. It's great to have you here. Cliff, what is telematics? Why is it important in Fleet Manager? Let me go back a bit. In the 1990s, it started off when we saw that massive spurt after 1994 of truck hijacking. And that's where it sort of started, on tracking the vehicle and getting it back into the operator's hands, away from the criminals. Then fleet management was added onto it. And then suddenly this word telematics appeared. And we were all a bit fuddled by what that is. Right. But it's a sort of, as an overall umbrella. But what is telematics? What are its various components? What are we looking at when we talk telematics?
Yeah, great. I think it's a great question, right? And I guess the industry is always full of buzzwords, right? And often there's different words that mean exactly the same thing. So for me, telematics is just an evolution of sort of what you explained. I think largely telematics is really governed by this phenomenon we call IoT, which stands for Internet of Things.
Yes.
And really it's about having something, a sensor, something that's connected to the internet or connected to some type of central computer some way. And you're right, it's sort of flung into sort of the mainstream over the last probably 20 years. And there's really good reasons for that. First of all, when you're tracking things that move, positional data is really important. And over the last 20 years, GPS was invented, right? And GPS became mainstream in the consumer's hands, sort of moving out of the military sphere. So consumers and commercial entities could get hold of very accurate positional data. And then the second thing is sort of, it's fine to know where you are, but you need to tell somebody where you are. And, in the early days, people were building their own networks and putting up masts and kind of connecting things now together. But really what propelled it was the cell phone networks. The cell phone networks obviously had massive infrastructure investment in terms of capital. And really for the first time, we had the two bits really come together, positional data and the way to connect that positional data to some type of server. So that, I think, in its essence is telematics, right? It's positional data plus recently, and I guess over the years, a lot more other sensor data. So temperature, vibration, accelerometers, all kinds of things, but then the ability to relay that back to some type of server and then provide that insight to people.
There was a difference. The first one, for hijacking, you needed to know the position where the truck was, positional data. And as you say, I remember there was GPS, and if you parked under a bridge, the satellites couldn't read it, so you couldn't find it. Then right. GSM and all this. So basically what you're saying is using technology not only to position, it's based on the positional data, but to better manage your fleet by, over the years, adding a whole lot of new parameters to the systems that accomplish better management achievements.
Yeah, so I guess if you kind of build on what I just said, right, I think the first hurdle to overcome was actually physically getting the data, so collecting the positional data, sending it some way. The next obvious thing is, okay, so now I have all of this data, so what does it mean? And I think there's obviously been advancements in the hardware side. So as you said, GPSs have got a lot better. In fact, there's now 4 or 5 different GPS systems globally now. So everybody thinks of GPS, but there's GLONASS and Galileo and a whole bunch of others. So positional data has been a lot easier, and the cost has come down dramatically. But the value really lies in that data, right? So if I know where you are and I know where you've been and I know what temperature your cargo is at, what can I tell you, right? And this is where the value of telematics really comes in. It's how do I use my historical data to plan my routes better? How do I use my current data to look for infringements and what my drivers may or may not be doing, or give them some advice on areas they may be traversing, or help me optimize? How do I monitor things like idling hours in vehicles so that I know how much fuel I'm using, which is obviously a huge issue these days with the cost of fuel. So I think as the industry matures, we're really learning how to gain insight out of the data. And with anything, right, it's a tool. So I think operators that use the tooling carefully are able to eke out performance in their fleet, able to save themselves money, increase the efficiency of their operators, attract more work potentially because of the flexibility of their drivers. And this really means rands and cents at the end of the day. So again, as with any sort of technology-enabled industry, the tool is there, but it's up to you to make use of the tool to drive the efficiency.
Now, the tools, and many of the older truckers out there will remember this, were all manual. Like you're talking fuel consumption, you used to get fuel records.
Right.
You used to get the tachograph. And people had to read that tachograph, gave good information and all that. But this is taking it all out of the manual system, giving you instant information. It's giving you eyes on the road when you're, and by the way, with those days, you never saw your truck once it left the depot. You never knew where it was.
Right.
So it was a report back system,
right.
A manual record system. Telematics has taken all that out of the manual arena, put it into the instant data arena and instant reports, and helping you to analyze a hang of a lot more than you used to do manually. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I think the analogy is very similar to most industries, right? In the old days, we sent mail via post, right? And
Yep.
if you wanted to send a letter to somebody in England, it probably took a month to get there, and you maybe waited a month to get a response, right?
Yeah.
And an analogy is just perfectly the same, right? So I think now that we understand in almost real time physically where you are, what your engine revs are, potentially what fuel is in your fuel tank, you can close the loop much more quickly on feedback, right? And as humans, just as human behavior dictates, if you provide feedback, the quicker you provide feedback, the better you corrective action. So digitalizing the experience absolutely changes the feedback loop dramatically, and therefore reinforces the good behavior, penalizes the bad behavior quickly. And obviously with machines in the loop, analyzing the data, giving you insights, it's much more efficient than humans looking at graphs, right? So we're able to filter out from all that sea of data, and make no mistake, we're collecting a lot of data, which is the data that's pertinent to you. What feedback do you need to give and when? Maybe a good example of this is that we have a product called SpeedFox, and that product really regulates the driver's speed according to the actual road speed zone that is in real time. So instead of giving the driver feedback maybe a week after he's come back from his trip to say you had a speeding violation 3 times in the last week, he can't even remember where that was, how's he ever going to change his behavior? We tell you right there and then, and if you don't listen, we'll actually reduce the speed of the vehicle. That really changes behavior in real time, and ultimately, from a safety perspective, is good for everybody.
And that is not a policeman. It's actually improving driver behavior for the betterment of the driver, to improve his performance and therefore improve the bottom line of the company, because crashes and extra fuel consumption are a bit costly nowadays. So it's a huge benefit to the truck driver, isn't it?
100%. And often I think we think about this as a negative, right, as a penalizing property. But often, actually, we find most speed infringements happen in low-speed areas, not high-speed areas, and they're often unintentional.
There we go.
So you traverse from a 40 zone into a 60 zone, from a 60 zone into a 40. You don't even notice it, right? And often, so actually, these tools tend to be really proactive in helping drivers, not there to penalize them. Yeah. Actually, it helps everybody at the end of the day.
And also helping the transport operator. There's a whole thing, if you can measure, you can manage. If you can better measure, you can manage better. And so, You're giving him all this information so that he can not only manage his drivers, a lot of accents on that, but manage the company better, isn't it? There's a whole lot of parameters in telematics that enable the operations manager, the managing director, the financial manager, everybody to get on board and benefit with proper measurements.
Yeah, I think this is exactly it, right? So I think I'm talking a lot about data and measurements, and maybe it's a little bit technical, but at the end of the day, I think what all of this is all about is to understand the levers in the business and what creates efficiency. And I think there are some common points, obviously like fuel consumption and driver behavior, but maybe different businesses have different requirements. And as you rightly said, I think different people in the organization are probably concerned with different parameters. So the MD is probably a lot more concerned about his income, his operating income, his expenses, and the profitability of the company. The fleet manager is probably much more concerned with driver scheduling and resourcing and all of those good things. So I think the data enables us to provide different views to different people and for them to make better decisions. I think about it a lot like medicine, I guess, at the end of the day, right? So you go to the doctor, you may have something wrong with you. He sends you to a radiographer, they take an x-ray, right? That's just data. The radiographer is looking at something, he gives the doctor advice, they make decisions, and they give you a diagnostic. This is kind of the similar analogy. We're taking the data, we're looking at it, we're providing some insight, and we're allowing you as the operator or as the MD or as the CFO to make better decisions on how to run your operation.
Fantastic. Do you need a little massage or injection on your hip, or do you need a total hip replacement?
Exactly.
You got the measurement and the management of that better. Let's just touch on big data. You not only, the beauty of the telematics today and dealing with a company like yours is you getting data, millions of data inputs every day. And it's not only my fleet that I am benefiting from, the data that it's emulating from my fleet, but through big data, which is described as the new gold of the world, and of course artificial intelligence, I'm getting the input of thousands and thousands of trucks out there to better my fleet. So in other words, I'm getting industry experience based on big data that you put together and might put in a dashboard for me, and using artificial intelligence. Just go into that for us a little bit in very simple language so we can understand it.
Yes. I suppose the way to think about big data and certainly this crazy buzzword called artificial intelligence is that if you've got a whole bunch of data, and as you rightly said, we collect really a lot of data, 380 million records a day.
I was going to ask, 380 million?
Now, that's not individual GPS points, that's actual records. So one of those records may have multiple GPS points or sensors in it. So it's a lot of data, much more than any human could ever analyze, right? And if you think about it, what's traditionally happened now with data or visualization or understanding is that data is often presented to people in graphs or in spreadsheets or as a trip on a map. And that is often left to the human to understand. So the fleet operator has to look at these reports and decide whether this guy's driving well or not well, or look at the usage reports and decide whether his fleet is being optimally scheduled. But what we're learning with machine learning is that we can start moving some of that analytics from the human brain doing it to a machine doing it. And these machines are not, they're getting much, much smarter, but they're actually reasonably silly still. But they're really good at doing a singular task. So if you train the algorithm, they call it training, on a lot of data, and you ask it to predict what's the best route to take, or predict what's the most optimal schedule based on all the bookings that you have coming in at the moment, they're really good at doing that. And so our data, kind of a little different to your point, what our data allows us to do is train a very good algorithm so that then you can give it your requirements and it can give you an answer or a recommendation. And I guess in some ways we think about it like a tool. We think about it as having somebody reading your reports and providing some advice to you, saying, well, based on what we're seeing, we suggest you route like this or you schedule like this. But we still like to have a human in the loop on most of these to kind of take the advice, look at it, say, okay, that makes sense, and then execute on that.
And that is where I think an important advancement in the service providers like yourselves was you started a bureau service, because it might scare people to think, wow, all this it certainly scares me, all this technology and all that, I'm a trucker, but you have a bureau service that becomes my friend, my advisor in every aspect of my needs for my operation, And that was a big breakthrough, I think, or a big advancement for taking the fear factor away of technology.
Yes.
You've got a bureau service that helps me. Just touch on that.
No, absolutely. No, I think you penned it quite correctly. I think, I think bureaus, or I guess services are not new, right? I think taking some of the complexity out of running something and providing that service to people is certainly an industry that's been around for millennia, right? I think in this particular case, we realize just what you said, is that there's a certain complexity to using the tooling and gaining the insight, running the tooling and making sure that everything is reporting in and that you can understand the data that's being provided. So our bureau service is just that, where we will effectively be your operations, look at all the data, manage the health of your telematics on your fleet, and provide you just with those distilled insights that allow you to get to doing the business that you're good at, and that's running the fleet operation.
Yeah, your telematics system is almost like an outside consultant to you.
Absolutely, it's a tool.
On a daily, weekly, or monthly basis, whatever you want, but catering specifically to your needs in your operation, which you can outline ahead of time with one of your consultants or something.
100%. I mean, it's a true managed service, and I think in a managed service there's always the requirements of the client, and then how we operationalize that internally and provide that service back to you. And you're right, it is a game changer. It's something that allows big and small fleets to benefit from, I guess, the extensive experience we have in running those software packages, gaining those insights and providing those recommendations.
We're going into all the different, for all the people out there, we're going into all the different little needs that you can have, such as driver behavior. What dashboard do you want? A dashboard can cater exactly to your needs, give you just the information you want. And but would I be correct in my statement that I actually opened up with? The telematics system is no longer a nice to have. It's actually a must have, and I want to add something on. The big bells and whistles of telematics systems and the cost initially back in the old days scared the small operator. And now the small operator is facing the same challenge as the big one, except on different figures, lower figures, but same challenges. Is it a must have? And is the small operator now in the market for this?
I definitely think so, Patrick. And I think if you look at most technology advancements, just take the mobile phone, right? When the mobile phone came out, it was really the wealthy that could afford it. Yes, it gave the benefit of having connectivity wherever you are. But as technology matures, price points come down, adoption increases, and I don't think there's many people that can live without a mobile phone today, right? And we feel the same curve is applied to telematics and certainly fleet systems, right? I think the price points, the managed services that we've just talked of are at price points that are affordable to almost everybody, and I think the benefits speak for themselves. So, yeah, you can still walk if you want to, but I think most people tend to use the wheel that it provides an accelerated way of transport. It's exactly the same with this level of adoption. We believe that the technology allows you to make better decisions, creates efficiency, and largely pays for itself many times over. I guess the warning is that, like as with any technology, you need to adopt it and embrace it to gain the benefits, right? So if you just, again, coming back to the mobile phone analogy, if you just use a mobile phone to make phone calls, well, it's kind of still the same as the landline, right? But if you embrace the apps that you get on the platform, the music and the entertainment, all the other opportunities that it opens up, then you get a lot more value. And I believe telematics is a similar thing, right? So we talked about instant feedback and changing the way you provide feedback to drivers. We talked about better route planning and optimization. So I believe to really gain the advantage, you need to think differently. You need to open yourself up to working in a different paradigm. But certainly data shows that if you do that, I think the investment pays for itself handsomely.
I couldn't agree with you more. I remember when the cell phone was introduced, I said to a friend of mine, this is a gimmick. It's never going to work. Look at it today. You have to embrace the technology. And although originally scared of it, scared to push the button in case you're going to delete something or do something, it's part of our lives. In fact, it's taken over our lives. Sure. But the telematic systems for your operators out there, it's there, it's developed, and you don't have to be scared of it. You have to concentrate on your core business, running transport, satisfying your clients, and you have a consultant in your telematic system on helping you to manage every single aspect of that and every single kilometer and every drop of fuel even that you're using. And Cliff, I thank you for explaining the broad picture of telematics, and the other episodes we're going to details. As I say, we're unpacking telematics now. Cliff, I'm sure we could have spent another day talking if we go into details, but God bless you and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Patrick, and thanks very much for having me, everybody. Thank you.